Guys like me were brought up to follow codes.
Hey, jerk off. What'd you say? What?
Obviously, you were the kind of first piece in place for this when the casting was announced. How was it getting that approach about leading this film?
I mean, it was life changing. It was a role that I'd been waiting for my whole life, and after working 25 years in movies, I'd never had this kind of an opportunity. So I was aware immediately that it was just a huge stroke of good fortune.
Oh, I was immediately all in just because, I was so inspired by David's writing. Nobody writes like David, and I don't know how he does it, but he has a unique voice, and all these years into the business, I've learned not to question that thing. When something is inspiring you for whatever the reason is, you just walk toward that.
You have a history with the show. You've made episodes before. How did you set about making this feel different and like a film as preferred to a kind of long episode?
Oh, how long you got? It's funny. In a way, to be honest, it's sort of like two episodes because if you see the film, there's kind of a time cut partway through, and in a way, it's almost structured like two episodes. But we also clearly wanted to play it as a single movie. I was just focused on trying to bring the spirit and the tone of the show, and that was partly about like how is the violence covered, how is the humor covered, how are the relationships covered, but also specific things like lens choices and how does the camera move, and trying to make that feel like it was continuous with the show at the same time that on a bigger screen things change a bit, and we have a chance to go a little bit more epic at sometimes. We have more money than we had on the show, but ideally you would feel like you were in the same world, being spoken to in the same language that the show spoke was the hope.
David, I think, was really determined that this movie exists as a kind of autonomous story that didn't depend on the series, but was obviously inextricably tied to the series. But he built the story around a character that didn't exist in the show except as a kind of mythological figure that people talked about. So I was lucky not to have the burden of doing an impersonation of a well-loved character from the series. In fact, David said to me early on, don't pay any attention to anything that anyone said about you in the series because they're all liars. And so I really was liberated of having to honor anything that was kind of said about him, and I could invent the character from my own imagination and my own research, and that was gave me a lot of freedom.
It's a fantastic ensemble cast. How was it putting that together? I mean, did it take a long time, or did you kind of get everybody you wanted to get, and how was that process?
It was a unique experience in my book because there's so much respect for the show and for David Chase that again and again we would go to our first choice for people and they would say yes because they too loved the show. So we went to Vera Farmiga for Livia, and she was the only person we went to. Same with Corey Stoll for Junior and John Barenthal for Johnny. Again and again, we were able to get people who ordinarily you'd have to chase and beg and plead and fight your way towards, but they were ready to sign up because of the show and the weight it carried, I think, for all of us. The hardest part to cast, I guess the two hardest parts were Dickie himself was the hardest one to sort of figure out what our take would be on him. And Harold was hard to cast. Finding Leslie Odom Jr. and having him shape that character was a huge relief, sort of, because that character has to carry a tremendous importance in the movie, but he doesn't have as much story time as you might wish. So Leslie managed to infuse it with so much intelligence and sort of gravitas that he held his own in the movie.
It's a character that's entirely new and doesn't have some of the past links that the other characters have, but obviously is a part of a real history, meets people who we know about. How was it kind of blending the two?
Oh, I found that really exciting because I could lean on my research and my knowledge of men like Harold. Harold reminded me a lot of my grandfather, and I could also use my imagination. And there were parts of Harold that I could author myself, as an artist. So no, I found that super exciting.
Some of the characters are playing people who were in the show, and some are playing brand new characters. How was it kind of balancing between? Because I guess no one wants to be accused of doing an impression of somebody else, but you have got to marry the two things.
Exactly that. Yeah, that was the phrase we always used was, this is not going to be just an impression. But at the same time, we secretly wanted them to do a little bit of an impression. So, the way I handled it was to talk to them like, think of it as you're playing a historical figure. And if you're playing Abraham Lincoln or you're playing, Margaret Thatcher, there's certain things you're going to want to nail in terms of their mannerisms and stuff, but make it your own. It has to be a three-dimensional performance. Vera was a perfect case because she really nailed the voice and the mannerisms, but she's showing other facets that we never saw in the character. She's sort of beautiful, and you see a kind of romance between her and Johnny, and you see her kind of yearning in her to be a decent mother in a couple of scenes. That's kind of heartbreaking. So these are things that were not in the show, but she managed to bring that all together into one performance, while at the same time she was channeling Nancy Marchand in a really skillful way.
Sopranos was like very, very luckily a part of a string of amazing ensembles that I've gotten to be part of. In many ways, as an actor, it's my favorite place to be, as a useful member of a winning team, because it makes me rise to the occasion. Hopefully, on occasion, it makes me rise to the occasion, and it forces me to do my best to give as good as I'm getting. Because within that community, within that ensemble, I'm getting quite a bit.
They were all just like brilliant actors and so carefully and well chosen for their roles. One of the great things about this movie is that it's a kind of Trojan horse, in that this is a classic old-fashioned style of movie that was made in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s at the studios all the time, like a crime drama of a mid-range, $50 million crime drama. The studios don't make those movies anymore. They only make these, Marvel movies and whatnot. And so it was the fact of this popularity of this pre-existing show that allowed the movie to be made, and it also allowed David and Alan to cast whoever they want, and they assembled this cast based on who was the perfect person for each role. But they were all fantastic. Michael and I had been cast months in advance, and so we spent a lot of time together down at this diner here in downtown Brooklyn called Junior's Cafe, and we would get together once a week and just shoot the shit. And by the time we started filming together, we really had a very easy and affectionate rapport, so we didn't have to fake it.
The period detail, is fantastic. How is it kind of having all that realized?
The period stuff?
Yeah. The cars, the clothes, it's all, so perfect.
Yeah, well, it helps having Amy Westcott did the costumes, and Bob Shaw, who designed the show, and I also did Mad Men with him, nailed the look of things. I love doing historical stuff because you get to sort of world build, almost like you're doing a fantasy thing, but being accurate is part of the joy of it, because you can find such richness in being truthful about it. So Bob created the visuals for that world in a way that was great. One of the biggest challenges was doing the riot imagery and showing downtown Newark sort of torn up, first by looting and then by kind of overreaction from the police. And that was fascinating to do, but also I felt like a kind of an obligation to get it right. So we did tons of research, and literally everything you see, including the shot of the kid being shot, was lifted from photographs and video or film at the time to make sure that we were being truthful about it.
How was it kind of inhabiting all that?
Well, I mean, that's the stuff of dreams, really. The suits were all tailor made for me, and just the way that the presentation of these people was so, ironically, just the total opposite of what was going on in their lives, which was just, in my case of my character, just total mess and chaos and horror. But he presents himself to the world as somebody who has everything under control and is sort of perfectly turned out. And so, yeah, to be able to wear those clothes and listen to the kind of music that was popular at that time, Frankie Valli and Sinatra and all those guys. It just was, it's a world that is very enjoyable to kind of live in for a period of time.
When I started doing movies, I realized, like, man, this might be the closest thing to time travel that you can get. In many ways, it's like it can feel like cheating, because coming from the theater, there's so much we have to imagine. Theater is not about the literal in most instances. It's symbolic. So yeah, coming on a set when the car is literally here, and it's it's not even rebuilt. Like, this is the car, and they've gone to such they've gone to such lengths to make sure that it is period specific. And anyway, yeah, it does. A lot of your work is done for you. Said all that to say, and in Sopranos, it was like even down to the underwear. I mean, like, a lot of this stuff, it affects the way you walk and the way you talk, and it affects the bop and the, and the bit, you know what I mean? Like, it's just, it does a lot to evoke the characters in the world for you.
Uncle Dick.
Growing up with the family takes a toll.
Maybe an ambassador to England or France.
You're my nephew.
Might like to gamble.
I want to do whatever I can to help you.
You may be a businessman.
My gift to you.
I want to go to college. I can't get caught with shit like this.
Look, you take the speakers, right? At the same time, you say to yourself, this is the last time I'm ever gonna steal something. It's that simple.
Let me go talk to him.
He only listens to Dickie.
Gotta do something about Dickie Malasani.
Maybe some of the things you do aren't God's favorite.
You lead by example. We'll make the right decision. This kid's got what it takes.
As far as your nephew goes,
I'm listening.
stay out of his life.